Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today for today's webinar, part of World Class Welcome. It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Samira Hussein with Johnson County Community College, who's going to be our presenter today. We are looking forward to sharing this. This webinar is recorded and available on demand. I'm Lori Piper, Assistant Director for Global Resources with the International Division of the Kansas Department of Commerce. We do, in Global Resources, we do diplomacy, global resource development. The International Division also does international investment attraction and export promotion programs for the state of Kansas. In the World Class Welcome webinar series, these are the sessions that we currently have scheduled. We would love to see you, and again, we will be having these available on demand. And so with that, I would like to now turn things over to Professor Samira Hussein from Johnson County Community College to talk with us today about how to develop rapport with international travelers. Thank you, Professor Hussein.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you for that introduction. I will briefly go ahead and describe a little bit of my background. I have been a professor at Johnson County for a number of years, was born and raised in Pakistan for the first 18 years, and then came to the United States as a student, and actually have family residing all over the globe, with an older brother that lived up until recently in Scotland, a sister in Australia, both of them physicians, nieces, and everybody in Europe, and friends and family in China and in Egypt as well. So, with that said, I also teach international business courses. I personally consider myself well traveled, I would say, with 32 countries and counting. So, one of my passions is to go ahead and share whatever experiences I have gathered in terms of what makes connecting with international visitors or travelers or people from other countries, making that connection, what makes things work, and what are some things that we can do to make those experiences even better. With that said, I have a slide that I would like to share and kind of give you some ideas on what are some do's and don'ts also, and some good ideas that we can basically incorporate to give a world-class experience, if you will. So one of the things that I think we need to, of course, we have a major world event coming up, like the 2026 FIFA World Cup. When something like of that nature happens, it brings global attention to our part of the world, and Kansas City, along with 10 other cities, 11 cities in all, if I'm not mistaken, will be on the global stage, and folks will be coming from different parts of the world. This is an excellent opportunity to highlight the importance of what good hospitality looks like. And one cannot overestimate the role of service providers, who will play a crucial role in shaping the visitor experiences and showcasing the local hospitality during the event. We've all heard of the good Midwest hospitality, but now is the time to really put it into practice and showcase what true Midwesterner values look like through our hospitality experiences, if you will. Some of these key strategies that I think that are going to be important are going to be how to really focus on cultural sensitivity, personalized attention, and inclusive practices for diverse groups. Now, these may be concepts, but these can be put into practice. And in a minute here, as we go along this webinar, I intend to show some examples on how things can be brought to life by not just having these as concepts, but to actually see what that looks like in real life. So the agenda is to focus on communication strategies, both verbal and nonverbal, and how we can bridge those language gaps or barriers. Uh, Also on personalized service, and what does exactly personalized service look like, rather than a simple good experience, but to truly bring out the cultural nuances when offering these services to visitors from different countries. And then cultural curiosity and adaptability. Cultural curiosity and adaptability is very, very important because that shows that we are not engaging in stereotypes, but we are actually genuinely curious on the cultural practices in different parts of the visitors from different parts of the world, and how we are ready to adapt our services when engaging with these diverse travelers. And lastly, what do inclusive practices look like? How do guests feel welcome and respected regardless of the background? Those are the things I want to focus on today. So let's start with communication strategies. Now, clear verbal communication, I cannot emphasize that enough. I mean, as a professor in United States for the last at least 3+ decades, I personally speak 5 languages. I pride myself on using clear, simple language, but I realize that even when we are speaking English in United States, the understanding can be different. Imagine how much more it becomes difficult for a foreign traveler when we are engaging in local idioms, and we are not sure if the other person has truly understood what we were trying to imply with that idiom. So I personally, even after I want to say 4 decades in this country, feel sometimes lost when idioms are used, especially in the department meetings. My colleagues will tell you that when they take a shortcut, which is pretty efficient actually, however, the exact I get a general idea, obviously, but the exact notion of what they are trying to accomplish is lost on me. So, my suggestion would be, in order to practice clear verbal communication with non-native speakers, try to avoid idioms as much as you can, speak slowly, and confirm comprehension with not closed-ended questions, but rather open-ended questions. Is there anything else? How could I explain this better? Or maybe you have other questions, if you will, rather than, did you understand? That makes it a yes or no for the other person. Positive nonverbal signals. That's another big issue in communication. Maintaining friendly eye contact, using open body language, and respecting personal space to convey warmth and professionalism. I can give you examples. When I was teaching in China, as an example, I assumed that making eye contact directly with the students, as I had done with my American students, would work really well. But there, I I think having a direct eye contact was considered rude. And after spending a few weeks, I realized that it's important to respect their nonverbals and create a different welcoming environment rather than being direct. And sometimes people from different parts of the world may consider that if I make eye contact directly, it's it seems that I am ready to engage in a conversation, but perhaps they are not confident in their language or not ready with, uh, they're too new, if you will. And so they're feeling shy or they are not confident especially in a group environment. So I had to adapt because now I was on the other side. I cannot emphasize the positive strength of nonverbals. In the Middle Eastern culture, the same thing. The positives of nonverbals is great. Putting the hand on your chest in a Middle Eastern environment, or I would say throughout the Islamic world, really genuinely conveys warmth and graciousness, and it can signify that I hear you, I'm with you, I will do everything I can to make this a friendly experience. And then cultural sensitivity. That's another issue where considering the cultural differences in gestures and expressions to avoid misunderstandings and build trust with diverse guests. So, what could be considered, for instance, the thumbs up in the United States, that genuinely is considered A1, or it is considered positive. But in some Indian culture, and right now, I think things evolve, cultures don't stay constant. But if you show the thumb sign, it's considered extremely rude that I give you nothing except my thumb. And something as simple that what we are taking for granted in United States with the thumbs up sign could be considered so rude in another culture. One would never think about it. Or while you're sitting, in terms of with for instance, in most South Asian cultures, I would say while you're sitting, the sole of your foot is facing the other person. That's extremely rude, if you will. So being mindful of these types of nonverbal gestures that you didn't mean to offend anybody, but it could be considered offensive. Another example is, let's say I checked into the hotel, I'm at the front desk, and the person who's helping me has turned his back and is trying to gather papers and is still talking to me. That would be considered rude, that you're talking to my back. Showing your back is considered a rude gesture. These are some simple nonverbal uh, gestures that one can avoid when dealing with different cultures and getting educated, because what you're trying to do is accomplish is creating a rapport by showing respect and genuine hospitality. So we can have different types of scenarios and do the role plays ahead of time so that the staff feels comfortable. You can have different countries like Brazil, India, Japan, China, Jordan. These are the countries that will be coming. Might as well start role playing those types of exercises and scenarios to create confidence rather than um, sort of assuming that you've read about a few things and therefore you are ready, if you will.
So,
Handling
Professor,
communication challenge. Okay, okay, go ahead, Lori.
so Professor Hussein, do you have a recommendation for where people might get information about different cultures or have some guidance in the role playing?
There are quite a few places. Of course, my approach is more academic and very assessment heavy approach. But right now, there are a number of cultural websites. And if you want, I can send you a list of those as a follow-up to this presentation, which you can share. There are too many to mention right now, but one, for instance, Cultural Detective comes to mind um, offhand. There are others. Some are free, some are pay as you go. Different types of scenarios. There are professional companies, so I can send you a list if that works for you.
Um, sure, we can do that. And then also, just the recommendation of, doing a search for, understanding um, nonverbal communication and, you know, various cultural um, ways of being polite or things to be aware of so that we're not inadvertently impolite. I think people can do that, but if you have resources, that's also great. And then I really appreciated the examples that you gave, and those help illustrate what we should and shouldn't do, but also some signs that we can look for in our guests' body language. So that's really helpful in several different ways.
Thank you. Yeah, I believe that intentionally nobody wants to offend, but again, subconsciously we may be doing things that may appear to be somewhat problematic as such. Uh, Another website that I think that just now I tell my students to actually use, and it's a very good overview. It's University of Michigan federally funded website called Global Edge. That would be a really good one where just a overview of the country itself, what type of economies or, just broad facts, and then the cultural do's and don'ts. That would be a good one to train the staff or to share with the staff. So, handling communication challenges, again, scenarios including managing slang confusion. Um, I was recently showing one of the TED Talks to my students, and the manager of this multinational who actually manages 14 or 15 different countries, while they were on the Zoom call, they were talking about, man, that guy killed it. And the Indian on the team was extremely offended because he had worked really hard. And to say that you really killed it, team, he thought that was a slap for the poor work done. But it was actually, or for, our staff here to say that's a killer burger. What does that mean, killer burger? I remember my first time coming to United States and taking a class on psychopharmacology because I'm a trained clinical psychologist at heart. I came to the United States for that purpose, actually, and then went into business just to share a little bit more of my background. And I remember the very first class that I was enrolled in psychopharmacology, I was asking the students what type of tests this professor was going to have. And they promptly said, oh, those tests are going to be fun. And I thought they were going to be easy and I would ace it and it wouldn't be a problem. And turns out that it was one of the hardest tests I had taken. So later I went back and I said, what was so fun about it? And they said, well, we told you it was going to be fun. I guess different meanings in terms of communication challenges because it was slang, and I did not quite understand the slang as I do now, and even then I use. So while we are and building empathy and confidence, when you have these interactive scenarios, you foster empathy and it prepares staff to confidently handle real guest world, real world guest situations. I think the more you practice, it's like a skill, you build it and you develop the empathy and you realize and put yourself in their shoes. They have left the country perhaps for the first time, perhaps they are seasoned travelers, but nonetheless, it's important to uh, build that empathy and confidence on both parts. Um, but let me kind of also go back to the building empathy and confidence and communication challenges. Right now, we are very fortunate that we live in the age where technology offers us a whole lot of tools that we can use to communicate better. I think that in this case, I would like to suggest that we use a lot of the different translation tools that do voice translations, Google Translate, for instance, 100 plus languages. Microsoft Translator, 70 plus languages. iTranslate is a good one. It has 100 plus languages. DeepL, that's somewhat limited, but another popular language translator, 30 plus languages. And Say Hi, that's another popular translator, 90 plus languages. And all these are supported both on Android and Apple. So you can do a lot of real-time translations to avoid miscommunication, if you will. All right. Next, I want to focus on personalized service. So I think this is definitely not my area, but I think tracking guest preferences is usually a good idea in terms of how you can give a much more personalized approach, whether it comes to recording languages or dietary needs or special requests and cultural notes. And I'll give you specific examples here in a minute. Welcome cards in native languages is another good touch. I know when I travel internationally and I see something written in Arabic, I feel quite at home. Even just a phrase, it doesn't have to be anything elaborate. It makes you immediately feel welcomed and individualized and valued. And culturally relevant complementary items. And then the lastly is flexible service delivery. So giving examples on each of these, I will tell you something personalized could be, for instance, countries like Jordan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Muslim, Middle Eastern countries that are going to be coming in. If there was a prayer rug, as an example, with the direction of Kaaba or the Holy Mosque in Saudi Arabia was already on there, again, something very inexpensive. One can order these to keep in the service in the rooms. That would be appreciated immensely because the first thing, as an example, as a practicing Muslim, I do whenever I travel within the United States or internationally, I got to find out the location of the Kaaba, the holy mosque in Saudi Arabia, because that's the direction I have to face when I offer my 5 time prayers, if you will. So keeping something simple like a prayer rug with the direction or with a little compass that shows where the Kaaba is. Another small gesture for a Japanese tourist could be something as simple as maybe keeping slippers that they can wear in the room, or maybe in a separate one that they can wear when entering the bathroom, because that's something that makes them feel welcomed. And this is a standard practice within the Japanese culture, instead of just keeping black tea and coffee in the room, it would be a great idea if they could get green tea and maybe a tea set so that they can feel welcomed and personalized to their particular taste. Flexible service delivery. It would be nice if I was, as an example, an Indian traveling or a Brazilian, where we like to socialize late until the evening, and now comes time and you want to have something. There's nothing available, everything is closed, 9 o'clock at night. And I realize that it creates an inordinate demand for the service providers to be having these types of deliveries late. But it would be nice to have some good sandwiches available, both vegetarian, non-vegetarian, gluten-free, so that you feel that there has been some consideration for the other cultures besides uh, you know business as usual. In terms of breakfast items, it would be nice to have, for instance, miso soup beside or some rice dishes for the guests from different parts of the world rather than Western omelets always. All right, so let's go further and see what else can we talk about in terms of our personalized experience. And so we are, like I said, fortunate enough that we now can enhance our service excellence with data collection. And perhaps many of the service providers already have a ton of data that they have collected on guest preferences, different types of nationalities, different amenities that have been preferred by different cultures. It's time to start looking at that data, if you will, and tailoring the experiences and being proactive. So, for instance, um, if I am Indian and I want to know where good Indian restaurants are, or for that matter, within your restaurant or within your area, perhaps you can tell me what the spice level is. Don't always assume that just because I'm an Indian, I'm not going to partake of any meat. Perhaps I'm not going to partake beef, but I may be interested in some dishes like chicken or fish, if you will. Again, individual attention is important. And then it's also possible that um, for instance, I may be, as a Brazilian, I may be interested in where the local entertainment joints are, where I can enjoy good music, good experiences that the locals use as well. So there are quite a few technologies that I wasn't aware of, but as I was putting this together, that actually do a wonderful job on tracking some of these personalized, some of the data that one can use to personalize these experiences. And I'll tell you one of the key things is to have efficiency in terms of, for instance, if I was a German visiting, I would like to have a faster check-in, possibly having a kiosk where I don't even have to stand there and deal with the person. I can just scan my phone or a QR code and I'm ready to go. Because for me, as a German, efficiency is far, far more important. And at timely events, if you will. So again, the best way to deal with that is to have scenario-based learning because these things can be just concepts rather than, but if we actually have different real life scenarios, we can definitely start to build a rapport with each other, because within your own staff, you have people that have diverse backgrounds. Let's start to build on those and then gradually move to international context, if you will. Because again, we can't assume that everybody in the staff that you currently have has the same background. In terms of brainstorming, I think bringing teams together, having idea generation on how we can do personalization, tapping into your own instinctive, creative, cultural intelligence is important. After you've had a session on where they can find some information on global regions, after, as an example, and then bringing the team together for creativity. Enhancing cultural awareness, um, I think once you start to build that cultural awareness and help the staff customize interactions, it gives a far more impactful training than simply having a one and done event or seminar, if you will. Next, I want to just go ahead and talk about cultural curiosity and adaptability. I think for me, there is a distinction between genuine curiosity about my rich culture, my background, or simply asking a question that may be framed in such a way that it is considered like I've already made up my mind and I'm asking a question just to confirm my assumptions about you. What I think here in terms of cultural curiosity is that I'm just curious why you Muslims do not eat pork, as an example. I'm very curious about that. That is a respectful way of asking, or why do they not partake of wine? You know, if you are a service provider and you ask that question in a respectful manner, then I think it creates openness and it leaves room for dialogue and engagement rather than, yeah, you guys don't eat pork. Not sure why, but yeah, that's what I've heard. Now that creates a closed approach, if you will. And similarly, if you appear to be respectful in terms of the questions you are curious about so that you can genuinely learn, then I feel it will create the trust so that you too can share the local traditions and encourage a mutual exchange. Avoiding stereotypes, for instance, like I said, I think it's important to have a broad overview of the culture that you are dealing with. But at the end of the day, I'm Samira Hussein. I'm not all Muslim women. I'm not all Middle Eastern women. I am who I am, but yet I do represent, in many ways, the culture, the values, the norms of many Muslims. And I think it's important to make that distinction that I may not be an early riser like many other cultures, or like maybe, most Muslims would have to get up really early in the morning for the early morning prayer. And maybe we assume that they are early morning people and they are ready for breakfast at 7:30 in the morning. I prefer breakfast at 11 in the morning. So again, recognizing that, yes, we shouldn't be sort of lumping every culture together. Cultural exchange activities, it would be nice if we could have a wall for our cultural exchange wall where we can share on the map where we are from, maybe have a space for our international visitors where they can share photos, phrases, maybe recipes, and create a team, a cohesion, a unity that, yes, we are from different parts of the world, but we are part of the human race. We're here to share our individual experiences. That the pride, the joy in sharing a piece of me is what that represents in terms of cultural activities. Um, Again, as I've explained, I may not understand why, if after I've paid my meal, why do I have to tip? How do we explain the entire tipping to somebody from South Korea, as an example, without offending them, but yet genuinely sharing? Again, as I mentioned, prayer needs. Finding a quiet spot if I'm in the lobby. Is there a space, or do I have to go back to my room, if you will? These are the scenarios that we can practice and start building that rapport that people genuinely are caring. Creating inclusive environments, ensuring all guests feel welcome. I've mentioned this through multilingual signage. Some of the families that will be coming, possibly somebody is in a wheelchair. How do we have that accessibility accommodation for those people? How do we make one of the examples I want to share something as simple. I was at the Pizza Hut at the college the other day, and I noticed that the young man standing behind the Pizza Hut um, kiosk or counter, if you will, we have several of vendors at the college cafeteria. He had just cut a pizza that had pepperoni, and he was going to use the same knife or the pizza cutter for my pizza. And I said, "Excuse me, do you mind if you use a separate knife or clean it before cutting my pizza? Because I would consider it contamination since I don't eat pork." I asked it very respectfully. I asked very politely. And of course, he was very kind. He indulged. First, it took a minute or two to understand what I was asking. But once he got it and I explained, he was absolutely fine in terms of accommodation. It's important at these events to, in order to create that rapport, to have a diverse staff. Maybe somebody that speaks a different language, maybe somebody who can at least, maybe somebody who has had a experience living overseas. And then again, I keep emphasizing scenario-based practices and brainstorming, not just there are possibilities that the other countries and the LGBTQ community that may be coming, how they behave or how their brains, how they how they are received might be different from the United States. We have to think about all possibilities, if you will. And lastly, I want to end with saying that have an action plan. Don't simply have, use some sort of a template to set what are your goals. Your goals may be very personal, very uh, to your organization. You have to assign roles, define the steps, and establish timelines for success, your action plan. And then have reflection and review. Yesterday, I was teaching a class at University of Kansas, and we had a case scenario um, where there was a joint venture, and there's a reason why I'm giving you this example. There was a joint venture between an American company and the Mexican company. I had divided the class into two groups, and I had asked them, there had already been problems. This was based on an actual case of Corning, the American company, and Vitro, the Mexican company, if you will. And while there was problems already in the joint venture because of the way the Mexicans had more of a hierarchy where they wanted to always consult the elders, the top management. An American Corning company was more interested in quick decision making, faster turnaround on marketing, on finances, and what have you. And I had encouraged students to really take on those scenarios, and one part of the class was completely on the Mexican team, and the other part, of course, on the Corning American team. Because of all these problems, they had to come to a point of the resolution. What are we going to do? Keep the joint venture or dissolve it? Well, the American team got up and told the Mexican team, we're just going to simply make you an offer. We're going to buy you out because we have a major presence in America and you need us more than we need you. You can only imagine because of scenario-based learning, I think people take on such personalized roles. Immediately, the Mexican team said, our decision is to basically dissolve this right now. We are not interested. Well, Corning realized, the American team realized they had just deeply, deeply offended the Mexican team. And so they went back to their team and came back and said, we are ready to work with you. We are ready to do some cultural training on our part. You should also relinquish some of your management control to us. But the amount of arrogance that had come through, the damage had already been done and there was no going back. So as a result, the teams decided that the joint venture was over, which is exactly what happened in real life to these two companies. I immediately asked the class to write reflection on what just happened here. I suggest that we do the same when we have our action plans in order to prepare for these world events. Team discussion and support. What are your current inclusive practices? How can you improve on these inclusive practices? And your support mechanisms, those are important for ongoing success, and your personal commitments. What are one of two or three key things that you can do? Nobody is expecting you to be a global expert. Major companies that have millions of dollars spent on training, they too basically sometimes have international failures because of the fact that they have not prepared their global executives well. So we can only imagine how things can happen at the level where things can go wrong when people have not traveled or not had training. So, really, that's all I have to offer. Hopefully, something was said that will trigger some thoughts on how to create that rapport through language, through maybe simple phrases on how to greet the customers, on room customization, as an example, um, looking at the different cultures, how a Japanese might prefer a quieter room, on technology. Maybe it's something as simple as having an international adapter in the room. Maybe something in terms of a list of personalized activities for these visitors. It doesn't have to be something elaborate.
Well, Professor Hussein, Thank you so much. You gave us a lot of very practical examples and illustrations. Some of the things that I really appreciated in your presentation are the importance of understanding cultures and appreciating them and being respectful, and also recognizing that nonverbal behaviors are going to influence the interactions, but yet at the same time being able to balance that with having empathy for your guests and recognizing that the guests aren't stereotypes, that they're individuals and they may conform very strongly to expectations or not so strongly to expectations, but that importance of being perceptive, being observant, asking open-ended questions, being curious so that you can really come to an understanding. I thought that was some really, really valuable perspective that you shared. And then also that being inclusive is more than just preparing for different cultures. It's also preparing for people from um, different backgrounds with different abilities in different situations, and that goes beyond culture. So, this were a couple of things that I really appreciated in the presentation.
I can give you a quick example. Last year, I was through University of Colorado doing in an international professional development opportunity in Singapore and Philippines. And while I was in Singapore, I decided to go visit my sister after we were done in Australia. And so I flew to Sydney, but I didn't want to carry my bags, all the way to Sydney because my return flight to United States was from Singapore. The hotel I was staying in, I told them I was going to be gone a week. Would it be okay if they kept my bags because I was coming back to that hotel? I didn't really expect in a minute, for a second, that they would acquiesce, but they said they would be delighted to. The way they took care of my luggage, the way they welcomed me back, I I was just blown away. I was just blown away. So those things, basically, another small example that came to mind was, when I was flying to Sydney, it was a late night flight. The young lady sitting next to me was from Japan, and she didn't have the pen to fill out her disembarkation card, which had been given on the flight as soon as we were going to land at Sydney Airport. I offered her my pen. The way she took the pen with both hands and then bowed, at 2 in the morning, I was not expecting her to bow and while accepting that small pen. And when she returned it with a little bow. So I knew that this was important. I was not going to take it from my front with my hand, with my right hand, and just take the pen. I took it with both hands that I too receive your gift of my own pen being given back. That conveys respect for her tradition. And at 2 in the morning, believe me, I was sleepy, tired. I didn't know whether my cultural practices were in sync, but you try to do the best you can.
Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing your experiences from traveling and your experience in being in different countries and being in the United States. And then also the recommendations that you gave for role playing and scenario playing and being creative and building on the various cultures that we already have here and that businesses might have on their staff. Those are also really very helpful suggestions. So thank you also for sharing some of the resources that businesses can use to go and get information, and also some technologies that they can use for tracking guest preferences so that they can really deliver that very personalized experience that is going to so impress international travelers. So we appreciate this very much. Thank you so much for your time today. We will record this and post this, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Lori, for all the work that Kansas Commerce does and your role and in terms of providing global resources and global information. And thank you for allowing me to share a bit of my background with your audience. All right. Take
It was
care.
wonderful. Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. You too.
Bye bye.